Thank you for tuning in to another episode of In Range. This is the September 2018 Q&A. These questions are provided by our Patreon supporters. Unfortunately, we get so many of them that we can't get them all, so we go through them and curate them the best we can, and that doesn't mean that the questions we don't pick aren't good. We just pick the ones that we think we can answer best right now, and hopefully if you had a question that wasn't answered and you're one of our supporters, submit it again next month and we'll get to it. This month it's only me. Ian is off traveling again in Narnia, so hopefully these questions will be something that I can address well for you guys. Let's go ahead and get started because there's a lot of them. BrandonHiPower. Do you think there is a future for recoil systems like the AK-107 and AN-94, or is that just a concept that would never work because of the complexity? Well, for you guys to understand what that means is what he's talking about here is a recoil system that has reciprocating weight. So when the gun fires, a weight actually moves forward in the action or something counterbalances the recoil, and as a result, physics being physics, weight moving forward, recoil moving backwards, it should mitigate any felt recoil. These systems tend to be very, very complex, and as a result, they are hard to maintain and hard to keep reliable. So there hasn't been a lot of attempts like that. That said, I've never gotten to fire one, so I can't really speak for what the experience is like to do so. I've watched videos of people firing them, and their experience and their reactions have been very positive. I do think there is a future for this. I think this is a concept that hasn't been really experimented with as much as it should be, and I think it justifies that. But, you know, it's hard to justify. It's hard to get anyone to want to try new things anymore because the rifles we have kind of are in that good enough position, you know, whether it's an AK or an AR-15, the reality is they're good enough. And so these little minor improvements don't really lend themselves towards true R&D efforts that we would need to see to make something like that work. Do I think that that's a concept that would work? I think it could work. I think could it be made less complex? Probably. Will we see it? I hope so. Is there a future for it? I don't know. George O. Are lever guns ever used successfully at two-gun? Well, it depends on how you define successfully. If you're saying, has a lever gun ever been used to win the match? The answer to that would be an absolute no. There is no way to use a manual gun and win at a regular two-gun match. You're going up against some automatics that are box magazine fed, whether they're an AK or an AR-15 or something like that. The reality is that a lever gun, anything manually actually, whether it's a bolt gun or a lever gun, is just not going to be able to keep up. Now, at two-gun, the way we run the match, in which we try to design stages that are still practically viable and capable of being successfully completed with an iron-sighted AK, can lever guns be used successfully in that you can finish the stages with them? Most of the time, I would say yes, they can. Certain long-distance stages or very small targets might become a hindrance, but I myself have used an 1860 Henry and completed all the stages without timing out. I've used an 1866, and I did time out with a few of those. We had a guy years back that showed up with just a 30-30 and actually did really well. He was in like the top 15 shooters, so it's viable, and it's possible to use them, and it's absolutely possible to successfully finish the match. Probably not possible to win the match, but I wouldn't say that you shouldn't bring out a lever gun if that's something you like. As you know, at Two Gun we try to promote self-improvement more than necessarily winning, although winning is certainly part of that. So if a lever gun's that's something in your wheelhouse of interest, wheelhouse, no pun intended for revolver guys, bring it out, absolutely. Joe L. This isn't gun related at all, but what's your favorite tabletop RPG? And I know he means role-playing game, not rocket propelled grenade. Failing that, what is your preferred genre of geekiness, firearms aside? Well, I can't answer the tabletop RPG because, believe it or not, I never played one. Those things at the time that I was growing up were considered evil, and my mother and the school that I was attending was not allowing us to play those games because they were a gateway to bad things. So that was all part of a panic at the time, a moral panic in which people thought that Dungeons and Dragons would corrupt your youth, cause them to become drug users and do all sorts of evil things, become murderers, etc. And every role-playing game associated with it was considered as such. That kind of belief system still exists to this day, and you'll definitely find people who think that those things are still the case with role-playing games, although that's diminished to some degree. But I wasn't really allowed to play them. So my workaround, being a nerd and computer geek, was to play the computer versions. So I played a lot of role-playing games that were solo games, not tabletop, on my computer. Bard's Tale was my favorite. The first Bard's Tale, Tales of the Unknown, was incredible. And on that note, they just came out with Bard's Tale 4, which I'm very excited about. So I'm playing that now. 30 years later, Bard's Tale is still a thing. So I would guess in terms of what's my favorite genre of geekiness, firearms aside, it would probably be role-playing games on my computer and virtual reality, which I've talked about on the channel before. Kevin B. As someone who is too much of a non-conformist to get an AR-15, how much am I really giving up in terms of capability by getting an AK-74 instead? Depends on what your goals are. If your capability is for a fighting rifle, not a lot, because an AK-74 is absolutely capable of making effective hits out to 200-300 meters without a problem. If you get one with a side rail or modify it with some sort of Picatinny rail system, you can put modern sighting systems on it. Ammunition choices are an issue. You might want to look at an AK-74 in 5.56 instead of 5.45 to improve that problem. Magazine changes are slower but more reliable. General ergonomics are a little slower but reliable. You're generally going to be behind an AR-15 by somewhere like 20% in terms of raw speed on the clock. That's been at least my experience, and we have a lot of videos on the channel saying that. But between the two, how much are you really giving up? Not a lot. If you go with 5.56, even less. If you go with 5.45, you're giving up quite a bit because the ammunition choices on the market are quite problematic in terms of accuracy. I would urge you to not be a non-conformist in regards to AR-15s if you really want the best rifle on the market. Whether it's a What Would Stoner Do rifle or one of the other ones, an AR-15 really is the winner. The AK-74 is a close second. So realize when you're picking an AK-74, you're picking a second, not a first. But in terms of what are you giving up, depends on your goals. If you're trying to shoot matches, you're giving up quite a bit. If you're trying to have just a practical rifle for defense or for any type of function like that, or even two-gun, you're not giving up very much. If it's just for fun, then of course that's irrelevant. I have two questions that are very similar. I'm going to ask them together and then answer them as one. Greg C. For a What Would Stoner Do inspired carbine for two-gun action challenge style shooting with a Faxon 14.5-inch pencil barrel, flash hider or brake, and why? And Sean M. asks, should I be using a brake instead of a flash hider for competition? You know, it depends on who you're talking to. A really competitive three-gun shooter is going to tell you to use a brake because the split times are important. They have a lot of really close-range paper. They present targets that require lots of very close splits, and your recovery time shot-to-shot matter in three-gun in the matter of milliseconds, or at least seconds. And so brakes are effective in that regard. And in three-gun, they typically don't present things that cause you to have a terrible dust signature. You're not usually shooting under a car, under a VTAC barricade. You're not usually shooting inside of confined spaces. Muzzle brakes present problems for all of those situations. So, but if you're looking for a practical gun, or you're going to use it for two-gun, I would absolutely urge you to avoid brakes. Go with a flash hider. Flash hiders are far more practical, especially when you're talking about 5.56 or 5.45. They have a minimal amount of recoil mitigation, but the amount of noise and flash they produce is huge. People underestimate the amount of flash, and even worse, when you're down on the deck shooting in the dirt, the dust signature from brakes is horrendous. Sometimes it will cough up enough dirt that you won't be able to see the targets. So if you're looking for two-gun, absolutely flash hider, flash hider, flash hider, not a brake. Matthew J. What is a pistol caliber carbine actually good for? A number of things. You know, if you're looking for a home defense or practical weapon and you realize that you want the benefits of a long arm that has a shoulder stock and a trigger or a pistol grip and the ability to use both your hands and increase your accuracy as a result, especially under stress, pistol caliber carbine absolutely provides you something way better than a pistol would. Pistols are the hardest things to shoot, especially under stress. Pistol caliber carbine also provides low recoil, provides almost no flash signature, almost no dust signature, and in terms of noise, if you were to fire it inside of confined spaces, it's quite a bit quieter, especially than 5.56. So what are pistol caliber carbines actually good for? I would say all of those things. If those are things you're looking for, get it in the cartridge that you're interested in. 9mm is kind of an obvious choice, but whatever. And they're fun, they're low recoil, and they're really easy to use. So benefits of a pistol in terms of noise and recoil, benefits of a rifle in terms of being able to be more accurate. Obviously the deficiencies of being chambered in a pistol caliber. Christopher S. Would it be possible to get close to a constant recoil system in an AR-15 playing with multiple springs like in the Stealth recoil spring? Maybe. The problem I think you're going to have is you're going to be very ammo sensitive. You're going to have short strokes and other issues that are going to occur as a result. So you're going to have to really closely align that with specifically loaded ammunition that are exactly aligned with your spring weights. Some of the guys that are using low mass carriers and special springs in competition are getting close to this sort of a performance gain of a constant recoil system, but I think it's a little risky. If you've watched other videos we've done on InRange, some of the older ones we did with Jim Sullivan, he devised an AR-15 that pretty much ran on that function and it was incredible to shoot. So it's absolutely possible to do, but I think you're going to have to tie it very closely with your gas system and your ammunition choice. Grant H. This is a good one, and I think it's a tricky one actually. What's more important accuracy-wise for a precision rifle, barrel quality or ammunition? Well, Obviously, barrel quality matters in that if you have a barrel that's completely shot out or broken or has terrible rifling or is rusted or something like that, it's not going to matter much, no matter what ammunition you put in there. But let's go ahead and say that you have a reasonably decent quality barrel, maybe not a match grade barrel, but something of average quality at best. Ammunition actually matters more than the barrel. Barrel will obviously minimize your ability for total mechanical accuracy, but your ammunition will affect you faster than the barrel will. So I've seen some barrels that were not in great shape that with the right ammunition and quality ammunition would shoot really surprisingly well. And I've seen absolutely great quality barrels with poor quality ammunition shoot terribly. So I think that answers the question. The ammunition matters more than the barrel, but the barrel of course has a factor in it. Melvin L. I know Ian did a video on Battlefield 1, but do you also enjoy playing video games? And if so, which ones are your favorites? Yeah, I do. I don't play lots of video games. I actually mentioned this earlier in this Q&A. I do quite a bit of VR. I love virtual reality. I think putting on a headset and being in a space that you can interact with is an entirely different experience. And I think it's one that we hopefully will see more of with our future gaming platforms as well as interactive platforms and the ability to visit and see locations that you couldn't anymore. Like I did a video on InRange about the Hindenburg in VR. So I would say VR is a big deal, and some of the video games in VR, still Onward is my favorite in VR, which is a combat sim. And I mentioned earlier, a couple role-playing games. Bard's Tale 4 just came out, which I Kickstarter helped with, and very excited about that because it's a reinvigoration of a 30-year-old RPG franchise. Having fun with that. So I don't play a lot. I guess on my list right now, Bard's Tale 4 is on the list. Onward in VR. Gosh, Rising Storm is good. RO2 is fantastic, and I still play that. And System Shock 1 and 2 are absolutely my paramount favorite. System Shock 2 being the best video game I ever played in my life. So I hope that's a good list. Zachary E. What is your favorite two-gun stage that you have run or created? I would say you've seen the Casarda drill, which is the throwing of the kettlebell to be the next shooting position. I think that's my most productive achievement in terms of having a balance of skill, fun, physicality, and general effort involved in terms of skill building for it to be a very valuable, successful two-gun stage. In terms of my most favorite, it was actually one that dealt with a shotgun, not a rifle. Way back before InRange was ever a thing, we did a stage that recreated scenes or elements of the 1986 Miami FBI shootout. And in one of those, we recreated the firing of a shotgun one-handed from the back of a bumper of a car, and we used a Texas Star. That's actually part of the way the fight ended. He was able to shoot the ankles out from one of the adversaries by doing that. And but he was wounded and running the pump on the putting the gun on the ground, pumping it to cycle it, bringing it up, resting it on a bumper, firing, pumping it on the ground, bringing it up on a bumper, firing. And we did that in a stage with a spinner target. Excuse me, a Texas Star. It was fun, and it was really neat because it tried to recreate something that actually happened in a real gunfight. So that would probably be my favorite one ever, even if you've never seen it on InRange. London J. What would be the minimum gear necessary for a two-gun match? You know, we get this question a lot, and two-gun, at least how I run two-gun, the minimum gear requirement's extremely minimal. I would recommend a semi-automatic pistol that's magazine-fed of some sort, not stripper clip or something like that. You're better off with double stack, so a Glock or anything, any polymer gun with two mags, 3 realistically, and any semi-automatic magazine-fed, detachable magazine-fed rifle. So you can still get away with worse than that. You could have like a Tokarev and SKS, but if you want to be at least moderately competitive, a box magazine, detachable box magazine-fed rifle with 2 rifle mags, and I'm talking about 30 round mags here, and a semi-automatic box magazine, detachable magazine fed pistol with 3 mags. That will get you through pretty much any two-gun action challenge stage. What's more important than anything though is to have a holster that has good retention, because if you don't have a good retention holster, chances are you'll lose your pistol, and it's the #1 DQ at our match. Sling on your rifle and a way to carry these mags, and those can be pockets in jeans. You don't have to go crazy for gear for two-gun action challenge match. Some people come out in full armor and trooper, and that's what they want to do, but to shoot the match, semi-automatic rifle with a couple mags, semi-automatic pistol with a good holster and a couple mags, you're really good to go. And that's one of the things that I think differentiates two-gun from a lot of other competition venues. It's not really gear race required, and it's really not a gear race at all. Gear helps, but you don't need it. Deviant Olaf. Hey Deviant, just curious if you looked into taking any guns with you to Finnish Brutality. All right, guys, if you're watching the channel, you know we're right now right in the middle of the Finnish Brutality match we shot in Finland with our buddies from WWSD-inspired. Two-gun action challenge match came to Finland. We did not even bother to look into bringing guns. International travel with guns, I have no idea where to even start with that. And the WWSD-inspired guys were already lined up with Sako rifles for us and pistols. There was no reason to even investigate it, so we didn't bother. So no, Deviant, I did not even look into it, and I have no idea what the complexities are involved. I don't know that I want to find out. Seems like a giant pain in the ass. Rhian H. Why do military forces in desperate situations, World War II Germans, Spanish Civil War Republicans, etc., waste time, money, and manpower in trying to procure pistols, which are essentially useless in combat? Stereotypical military officials' rigidity, stupidity? Thanks. Well, you know, actually, I don't think that too many military forces put much emphasis on pistols. The Germans, for some reason, in World War I, maybe for more reason than in World War II, because they were more semi-automatic pistols that they could use for stormtroop and kind of activity in the trenches. But by the time World War II came around, pistols were of dubious military value and still are to this day. I mean, they have a place in time here and there, going through buildings, etc. But in reality, the rifle is the fighting man's weapon, not a pistol. So why do some of these guys use pistols? Well, it might be that they were in close quarters combat. It might be that they had been issued a bolt-action rifle still. And for example, the Germans in World War II, the primary rifle was still not Kar 98K. And a semi-automatic pistol in certain situations is definitely preferable to a bolt-action rifle, especially in close quarters. So I think that might be the reason you're looking at that. So I mean, like for example, if you look at the Americans in World War II with the M1 Garands, everybody pretty much had or an M1 carbine. Most people had a semi-automatic rifle or carbine. The need for the pistol became very much auxiliary at that point, if not unnecessary. It was just a backup to if your gun failed. But if you had a Kar 98K as your primary rifle, having a pistol, even if you had to acquire it through inappropriate means, was a benefit, because a semi-automatic thing is better than a non-semi-automatic thing, even if it's pistol caliber. So I think my answer to that is that, and I think that we saw that really pistols don't have a very significant impact in combat in general. And that's why most militaries don't put much emphasis on pistols as much more than status items. So generals having 32s on their hip to prove that they're a general, for example. Ian S. If submachine guns are better in full auto, do binary triggers bring semi-automatic PCCs closer to subgun usage, or are binary triggers still awful? Binary triggers are still awful. Binary triggers are always awful. I have never used a binary trigger that did not induce more malfunctions than actually success. They do increase the rate of fire, but you're better off with just a lower trigger weight match grade trigger. I think you can get almost to the same rate of fire without the liabilities of a binary trigger, and binary triggers just bring issues in general. I am not a fan of binary triggers. I will say that slide fire stocks work quite well in the right iteration. Binary triggers, from my experience, are a toy at best and absolutely not practically useful in almost any circumstance. Matthew C. Since Hudson has released a threaded barrel and comp for the H9, have you given any thought to going full Roland special with yours? Roland specials where you have a compensator, red dot, etc. Yeah, absolutely, I've thought of this. Now, I've got extended blaze plates on my magazines. I've got a Delta Point Pro on my Hudson 9. What I do not have is the compensator and threaded barrel. I've heard from people like Sinister Rifleman that the amount of recoil mitigation on the H9 is minimal, because the H9's design is already designed to reduce recoil quite a bit because of its low bore axis, but I'm sure it does something. He said it does. I have not yet acquired a threaded barrel and compensator from Hudson. I'd like to get one, so Hudson, if you want to do that, let me know, and we'll definitely do that on the channel. Denver S. Which was the more preferred revolver in its day? The Colt 1851/1860 or the Remington? I would say the Colt. I mean, the Remington's around. The Remington had spring weakness problems, and Colt had the name brand. Colt's like saying Glock nowadays. People would be like, why wouldn't you have the Glock? And Colts really were the dominant revolver in the time. Remingtons had their place. They're great revolvers. But the Colt 1851/1860 really was the de facto standard. And as a result, most people didn't deviate from the standard. So I would say the Colt. Nathan S. There are many guns that are referred to as pmag adapters on your channel. Do you believe that firearms, and especially cartridge development, are being held back by the constant fitting in of an AR-15 magwell? No, I don't. PMags are essentially the definition of reliable magazines. AK mags and PMags are mags that just for the most part do not fail. So I do not think that the AR-15 magazine is any more a liability. It was at one point. The USGI mags, the aluminum mags, they are problematic, and they went through many followers, and of course aluminum mags can be bent, you don't notice it, etc. But with the adaptation and the innovation that came with the PMag, especially the new generations of them, the AR-15 magwell is by no means a liability. The reason we refer to these as PMag adapters is because most black rifles don't do anything better than an AR-15 does. In fact, they frequently do something worse. So yeah, they stick a PMag in them and they do what they do. You pull the trigger and a bullet comes out the front, right? So, but I do not believe that the AR-15 magwell is in any way a liability anymore. Logan, with all the sanctions and import bans we now have, do you think we will soon see an end of the AK platform? I'm assuming you mean in the US, because there's no way we're seeing an end of the AK platform in the world. The AK is the most predominant firearm, I think, ever manufactured by a large margin. Will we see an end of the AK platform in the US? No. There's already too many here. There are manufacturers making AKs right now, people like Jim Fuller at Rifle Dynamics and others. There are parts kits still floating around. I do not believe we will see an end of the AK platform. It will always take second seat to the AR-15, but the AK will always be that second seat, and I don't see that changing. Tim, have you ever gotten burned out with competitive shooting of any sort? Oh yeah, actually quite a few, actually two of them in particular. I shot NRA-HiPower for a long time, which is the 200 yards standing, 200 yards sitting, 300 yard prone rapid fire, 600 yard slow fire with an AR-15 typically. And I did it for years and I became a master class shooter and I got 28 of my 30 leg points required to become a distinguished rifleman. And one day I just realized this isn't fun anymore. It just isn't fun anymore. It was stressful. When you would shoot a bad shot, you felt like your day was ruined. You'd travel long distances to fire the first round at Camp Perry and realize that you were no longer in the running. And that level of stress became something that was more stress than enjoyable, and I burned out on NRA-HiPower. And that's actually when I started shooting 3-gun and started helping run 2-gun here in Arizona, which became the 2-gun action challenge match. So hopefully getting burned out on HiPower was a benefit for the shooting community in general, because we're starting to see 2-gun really become more of a thing. I also got burned out on cowboy action shooting. Not really burned out, but a little disappointed. Cowboy action shooting is incredibly fun. I love it. I love the guns, the revolvers, the lever guns. Those guns are awesome. Over the years I shot it, stage design became more and more mediocre or pedantic, or just really had no creativity. Everything became 10-10-4. 10 rifle, 10 pistol, 4 shotgun. Very little movement, almost no dynamic movement. I tried for a while to start Western 3-gun, which required shooting on the move, and it just never really clicked, at least not when I tried to do it. So I kind of got tired of cowboy action shooting because 6 stages of 10-10-4, which were nothing more than changing the pattern in which you'd shoot on a steel target, became sort of boring. I still like it. I still want to shoot it once in a while, but yeah, I kind of got burned out on cowboy action shooting as well because the stage designs were just not creative enough and not physical enough to be compelling. Brock H, what's your preferred OS for a mobile phone? Android, Apple, or some other? This is going to get hate no matter what. If I said Android, it's going to get hate. If I said Microsoft Phone OS, it's going to get hate. If I said Apple, it's going to get hate. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you it's Apple iOS. It's not perfect, but the reason I go with Apple iOS is they have, generally speaking, the best security posture in an unmodified OS in a device out of the box. If you want to be a hacker and manipulate and modify and play with your phone, you have to go Android, or you can jailbreak your iPhone. But jailbreaking your iPhone actually mitigates a lot of the security features and measures that the walled garden restrictions that iOS brings have. So for me, I don't want to hack on my phone, I just want to use it. It's a device for me to get work done. So I go with iOS. So my preferred mobile device OS is iOS on Apple. And I think that the security features, sandboxing, and most of their work that they do to control the App Store is mostly done well and positive. Android is unfortunately a very malware rich environment, and unless you're very careful, it's very easy for your device to be compromised. Tim B, what is your opinion on a PCC as a home defense weapon and for competition? I already answered this earlier. PCC is perfectly fine. If you're happy with a pistol caliber for home defense, you're better with that than you are a pistol. So I would say a PCC, for the purposes of a large magazine, low recoil, low flash, low noise, is excellent for that choice if you're willing to go with a pistol caliber. For competition, depends on the competition. If you're going to 3-gun, nope, you're not going to be able to engage the targets at the range they're going to provide them. If you're going to a 2-gun action challenge match, some months you'll have an advantage, some months you'll have a horrible disadvantage. So I would say that depends. If you're going to a PCC competition, then of course it's a PCC competition. Matthew P. Me and my boyfriend recently moved to Texas from California, and we are both interested in getting our carry licenses. We don't know much about modern pistols, so what would you suggest in terms of carry? What kind of holsters and what type of carry do you recommend for yourself? One, you said you're not very knowledgeable about modern pistols. First thing I would say is get a training course. Look very closely at ECQC's ShivWorks class, the the close quarters combat class. You need to get some training. There's other training venues I can't mention more. That's my favorite is ECQC from ShivWorks. I would say that's your first thing. But in terms of the pistol, the Glock 19 really is almost impossible to not recommend. I mean, obviously there are things to carry for certain reasons. If you have certain size requirements, or if you have issues with concealability or things like that, then you have to have other considerations. Avoid pocket carry. I don't prefer pocket carry. I think it's a dangerous choice. And the Glock 19 is an incredibly perfect mix of size to capacity to carryability to still being large enough to being used effectively as a combat pistol. I still frequently carry a Walther CCP because of certain size requirements and concealability, but a Glock 19 is fantastic. I would say that if I was going to recommend to anyone, I would recommend look very closely at the Glock 19. And in terms of carry, once you have training, generally speaking, most people now are pretty much on board with appendix carry for a lot of reasons: retention, drawability, etc., as well as concealability, depending on your body type. Holsters, I really can't get into that. That is such a complex topic that it will go for another 3 videos, and you'll hear the comments below. Maybe people in the comments will want to make some comments on that below, and I check that out. But the Glock 19 is hard to not recommend, especially if you're looking for your one definitive carry pistol. Thaddeus C. If you could be present for one event in history, World War II, assassination of the Archduke, what would it be and why? Wow. That's a really hard one. What would it be and why? I don't think it would be any of those. I don't think it would be war even. If I could be present for any one event in history, I guess for me, 2 of them come to mind. It would be the first flight of Orville and Wilbur Wright. I think that'd be fascinating. And because there's such a poor eyewitness account of it, I would want to be, I guess this is war, I would want to have seen Tombstone in the 1880s. Very specifically had witnessed the actual fight at the OK Corral. I think that'd be my choice. It had a lot of influence in Arizona politics, in law, and in the Wild West history. And being actually to see there with my own 2 eyes and experience what those people were like would have been a fascinating thing. So I guess my answer would be first the gunfight at the OK Corral, and then after that the first flight of Orville and Wilbur Wright. Matt S. What do you think about the bird's head style grip on a single action revolver? I think if you're going to carry a single action revolver in a concealed carry format, which I would not recommend in modern times, but you go back to the Old West and you had a short barrel, like a 2-inch barrel or something like that, the bird's head grip is really comfortable and excellent for that purpose. If you're going to carry a full-size revolver, I think the bird's head grip does not give enough purchase that the old plow handle does, and I think the old plow handle on a single action army really is pretty much perfect. The Bisley's terrible, avoid that at all costs. Bird's head grip is really, really good in a small gun that's trying to be concealable, like a Lightning or a Thunder or cut-down barrel. So I'd recommend it on a small gun, but not a full-size single-action revolver. James A. I just got an AK and I'm planning to put an optic on it. Do you see Russian optics as comparable to what we see on ARs? And is there any point being correct? Am I undervaluing correctness? No, you're not. You are overvaluing it. I would say correctness is absolutely the last choice for an optic, because for the most part, the Eastern Bloc optics, Russian optics, Belarusian, whatever, are mostly garbage. They're really, a lot of them are really bad. I happen to really like using them. They're really interesting. They're designed with really weird characteristics, and we do feature them on the channel from time to time. The Obzor was a really good one, which was a one-off, which I found to be high quality. We found, for the most part, most of those Eastern Bloc Russian optics are not very good, especially when compared to what Americans think of as American optics. Now, obviously, an aim point is not American, it's Swedish, but the stuff in the Western world tends to be better. So I would focus on Western style optics. They tend to be they're more conventional, less weird, more reliable, and provide better results. So I would say correctness is only important if you're looking to build some sort of specific correct build. I would not look at correctness for any other reason than that. Greg P. If you're equipping a platoon-sized military force, what would you choose as your automatic weapon? The M27 IAR or the Knight's Armament light automatic machine gun? Oh, that's easy. I would not go with the M27 IAR at all. The M27 IAR is a piston magazine-fed gun with a heavy barrel that allows it to have a little bit higher sustained rate of fire than a standard AR, but it should not be a squad automatic weapon, in my opinion. The Knight's Armament light automatic machine gun, which I did, or light automatic assault machine gun, we did a video on InRange about it, is belt-fed, designed with a lot of fantastic features, is lightweight, and contains the rate of fire that I'd want from a saw. So as my automatic weapon choice, I would absolutely go with the Knights. There's no doubt about it. The Knights is the better choice. the world seems to be going really crazy with the HK, and we see the Marines, of course, going with the M27 IAR. But I think that Knight's automatic or assault light machine gun is a real winner, and it should be getting more focus, if not already. Leonard S. You usually do a rig rundown on yours or Ian's gear used in a match. I'd be interested in seeing the same thing on some other competitor's gear. Is there a reason for not doing that? Yeah, time. When we're shooting these matches, the ability to get the video that we get right now is I can't believe we get it done. Ian and I run around like chickens with our heads cut off trying to get introduction, conclusion, and match footage along with gear footage as well. Trying to get other competitors involved in that would make it nearly, if not impossible, to shoot the match. Maybe if we have more help at future matches, we'll be able to pull something like that off, but that is really solely the reason, is just time. The fact that we get these match videos done at all with each other and don't mess it up more than we do is really a miracle. John W. Could you run a 2G action challenge match with a PS90? Absolutely you can. In fact, we have a woman that's been shooting us for years, and that's her primary rifle, or PCC. She uses it as her pistol and her rifle, and does really well with it. Now, sometimes it doesn't have quite enough power for some of the knockdown targets, and sometimes it's really challenging at a 200-yard mini IPSC, but for the most part, the PS90 really does a good job. I would like to do it someday, I just don't have one. So that'd be interesting. I also tell you that even though the long-barreled PS90 civilian configuration that's not an SBR looks wonky, it still handles well, and that extra little bit of velocity you get really does matter on targets, because we've seen people shooting with regular SBRs and full-length PS90s, and that barrel length makes a difference. Alan, what is the earliest two-gun action challenge match equivalent in practical shooting histories? Were guys in the 1920s doing similar matches with their Remington Model 8 and Colt Pocket Hammerless? No. Not that I can tell. There were competitions, but they weren't running guns. They were the best they could really come up with are things like Hogan's Alley, with pop-up targets on an alley or pop-up targets in windows. The kind of physicality and stuff we do in two-gun action challenge match really didn't show up on the scene until the Soldier of Fortune matches from way back. And then they went back out of the scene for three-gun to take over the competitive venue. And hopefully two-gun action challenge matches bringing that back to the world. But no, I'm not familiar, and nor have I ever seen really equivalents of this. The exception of that, oddly, is in the Sturmgewehr exclamation point book from a collector grade. They actually have a training drill in there that was supposed to be used for training soldiers on the MP44, and boy, it looked a lot like a two-gun action challenge stage. In fact, I want to use it for a two-gun action challenge stage someday. But that's the closest I can see to that from history. The Soldier of Fortune stuff is the stuff that really brought that to the table. Angus A. There are a lot of internet clouds out there being thrown up by corporations for customers to deposit their memories and dreams. How safe are they? Are some better than others? Do you cloud? Oh yeah, everything's going to the cloud, isn't it? How safe are they? The answer to that is dependently safe, but the only way to make any of your data safe on the cloud is if you encrypt it personally and you're the only one that holds the encryption keys. If you have your private encryption key and they do not have an additional decryption key, it's reasonably safe as long as you're using proper encryption algorithms. In terms of how safe are the cloud is not safe. The cloud is mostly not safe. The cloud is mostly dangerous and recklessly handled. Some vendors deal with cloud better than others. I can't go through the list right now, but the answer is yes. I would say you need to do some personal investigation on that. But actually, interestingly, there was a real mega.nz, which has a somewhat sordid history. It really did a lot of this stuff right, and no one uses it because of the relationships from the past. But if you want to look at their encryption solution, mega.nz would be a good example of a cloud done well. But unless you control the encryption, cloud is not safe. So, doesn't mean you shouldn't use it, but it should change what you put on it. Jens K. Carl, would you consider 3030 an intermediate cartridge where proper military cartridges may be unavailable or difficult to find? Well, I don't think it's a military cartridge because it's a rimmed cartridge, so it's a problem for a semi-automatic gun. However, 3030 in terms of performance is really quite close to 7.62x39, and I would say yes, it actually is an intermediate cartridge. So, in terms of looking for a lever gun chambered in an intermediate cartridge, 3030 is an excellent choice. Laurence R. With the future of iPhones using only face recognition to unlock, Face ID, and given your recent encounters with the TSA, will security privacy-minded consumers be forced to use Samsung products? No, absolutely not. In fact, I would say that security privacy-minded consumers, ones that are not hackers that want to manipulate and modify their phone, should still stick with Apple and iOS. iOS has the best security posture and the best privacy posture from a corporation out of the box than anyone else. Whether they do it for financial reasons or not, it's irrelevant. They do have the best posture. What I would say is don't use Face ID, don't use Touch ID, use a reasonably strong alphanumeric passcode to unlock your phone. Simply put. Mavmanish. After using a modernized AK in 7.62x39 with modern gear at Finnish Brutality, has your opinion on the cartridge changed in either direction? Well, I would say the Sako Finnish rifles we were using at Finnish Brutality weren't all that modernized. And no, my opinion on the cartridge hasn't changed. It has a rainbow-like trajectory. It's harder to shoot than 5.56 and 5.45. It does have better barrier penetration, and if that's something you're worried about, then it's a good choice. But in terms of getting fast hits on target, it is inferior to 5.45 and 5.56. Dayton R. Thanks for putting out such great content. Thank you, Dayton. Have you ever thought of putting a medical drill into a two-gun action match? Yes, I have, and we've tried it a couple times, not on video, and it doesn't work. Sadly, but honestly, most people do not have medical training. They have not pursued trauma training, and while they spend a lot of hours on the range trying to get good at shooting, they may or may not even know how to use a tourniquet. This is a great deficiency in our community, and if you are one of those people, and I'm not trying to make fun of you, please seek out medical training. If you're in the Arizona area, I can recommend Independence Training. They are also one of our Patreon supporters, and they're part of our Patreon Buyers Club. Please consider looking into them. But there are lots of people out there that provide trauma training, and if you do not have that under your belt, please do so. The reason we can't include them is because so many people don't know how to do it, and it's not something that we can measure on the clock unless it's a skill set that at least people have a reasonable way to do it. If they literally don't know how to open up and put a tourniquet on, trying to teach them at the match and still run the match is not viable. Now, does that bring out a deficiency in their training? Sure. Could we score it? Would we just DQ them or something like that? Sure. But that's not what most people come to a match for, so it would be something that would put a bad taste in most people's mouths, and it is a sad state of affairs that most people don't have that training. So we have tried it, doesn't work. It can be done in certain tactical environments or an environment where you know the people have a certain skill set, but a standard match that's open to the public that has no real litmus test or ceiling of or barrier of entry doesn't work. But let me use this as a reminder to please consider getting trauma training yourselves if you don't have it. I mentioned the Buyers Club, guys. This is something that's real interesting. That's the end of the questions for this month. Hopefully you enjoyed this Q&A, and thank you to our Patreon supporters for providing these questions, and hopefully I answered them in a good way, at least to the best of my abilities. If you're not a Patreon supporter, please consider doing so. This InRange is completely supported by Patreon only. It's you, the viewer, that actually funds Patreon. We don't get monetization from something else. That's to keep this channel pure and honest and to be dictated to and owned by the viewers. That's you guys. We recently launched something called the Buyers Club at the $3 and above level. We have a number of vendors, Varus Deleka, Independence Training, Brown L's, ESS TAC, Manticore Arms, and others who are providing cool things like free shipping or special discount codes for stuff that are Patreon supporters. So if you're not one already or you're at the $1 level, please consider going to $3, being part of our Buyers Club and supporting InRange in a way that keeps this channel alive. If you can't do that, please just subscribe to our channels. You can find them all on inrange.tv. Subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks for watching.